Friday evening habit. Dr. Pox and the Political Architecture. We've got a full house today. We are joined by our friend from the Eastern Shore of Maryland, God's country, Nate Sanson. Comes from the land of saltwater taffy, some of the more haunted places on the Eastern Shore, where they have a tour of downtown Salisbury of haunted places, along with Ocean City, which is Maryland's playground. Frankly, we go there to play. And welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dwight. Glad to be here. It's going to be a fun evening.
It will be. It is going to be fun. It's been a busy week. And then we're joined by security expert, IT guru, former Marylander, former Michigander, returned to Maryland, Jeffrey Thornton. Welcome to the show.
Hey, everyone.
And then we are joined by the always tenacious Dr. Brian Griffith, who has a GW alumnus who is so eager about the news this week. He's like so giddy.
I'm not giddy. I mean, sedition is not fun.
No. Brian used to run a blog called Red Maryland. Now he's got a new blog called The Duck Pin, all things baseball, because he is running to be the next Earl of Baltimore.
I could do it. I mean, I'd happily take on the role. I know there's a lot of people on both sides of the aisle that would love for me to not be doing this and doing that instead.
He is a true believer like myself. He also believes in Orioles magic.
Feel it happen.
He knows this is going to be their year, 2021.
Okay, let's not write that check quite yet.
Bird's year. And then we're joined by Donald Irvine, media watchdog. He's got over 40 years of experience monitoring left-wing media biases, everything from the Westmoreland interview at 60 Minutes. And I know a lot of people are catching on now about the media being lefty biased, but Don knew this back when the Westmoreland interview was going. He knew this when they stole the election from Richard Nixon in 1960. And welcome, Don.
Thank you. Yeah, I think I was like 1 year old at that time, but whatever.
And then we have Leo Thuman from Case Western Reserve University, the school by two very good friends, Jim O'Donnell and Caroline Harper, graduated from there. Jim went on to medical school and Caroline went on to law school. And welcome, Leo.
Very nice. Thank you for having me on.
And how is Cleveland this evening?
I'm actually back in Baltimore now. I just finished up my coursework, but I think it's snowy. I need to check, but
the Sleep Rock.
Yeah.
And then we've got Wonder Boy from Montgomery County. He can build robots. He is building Lieutenant Commander Data in his basement as we speak right now. We have Ryan Nidak, Virginia Tech. You're a junior or sophomore now? Sophomore, right?
Sophomore.
Yeah.
I just want to open up with, if we're all doctors, does that make us more or less of a doctor than Joe Biden?
Yes, we are. We are more doctors than Jill Biden. Jill Biden isn't a real doctor. I think she got her degree out of
we had to table that one the week that came up. So.
But we had a very busy week this week. Few things happened. We had an election in Georgia. The Redskins are going to the playoffs for the first time since, I guess, Joe Gibbs was their coach, the second coming of Joe Gibbs. And a few other things happened. Don, I'll let you take it away. Center square.
Right. So as you mentioned, we're going to start off with, the main topic thing that's driving all the news pretty much so, and that is what happened in Washington, D.C. this week. So we're working up to the certification of the election, where Vice President Mike Pence was going to oversee that. There were a lot of very strong, ardent pro-Trump supporters that came into town, all from all over the country, matter of fact. President Trump actually spoke at, I guess you could call it the rally, and then they moved on at his behest to Capitol Hill. And not that long thereafter, things all hell broke loose. So, I mean, the first question, or at least one of the questions, is in terms of, what happened? I mean, who is to blame? Is anybody in particular to blame? I mean, President Trump's getting a lot of attention for this. I think people have got a lot of opinions about this. So let's go, guys. Jump in.
Well, I think at this point it's obvious that the president is responsible, at least insofar as riling everybody up for 2 months with these fakakta claims about voter fraud that have been completely unproven. His remarks at the rally on Wednesday certainly didn't help things by imploring people to go storm the Capitol. His words, not mine. And when you have as many bad actors who are in the crowd, and don't get me wrong, I think that 99.9% of the people who went there to this rally went there in good faith to peacefully protest, no matter how misguided the issue they were protesting was. But when you have, knuckleheads there who are very easily riled up, bad things happen. And at this point, that bad thing just happened to be an attempted coup d'etat against the government of the United States. And the president does, in fact, bear ultimate responsibility for that.
Brian, it was not a coup d'etat.
Were they attempting to interrupt the democratic process of certifying an election?
This is what they did was the exact same thing the FALN terrorists did in the 70s when they broke in and shot up Congress.
No, it's not even remotely the same.
I would say
they're not even on the same planet. I agree that the terrorist there was a terrorist attack. This was an attempt, no matter how poorly organized, to disrupt and stop an actual free democratic process.
Well, no offense to the president, but if this was a coup attempt, he should have brought some tanks and soldiers if he really wanted to do a coup. Okay. That if he really wanted a coup, that's how you do coups.
I'm not saying that it wasn't a well organized coup. I mean, not little Trump does as well organized.
But here's the thing: the biggest outrage is Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's hypocrisy. All summer we had cities burning, and what did we get? Oh, give them space. They're angry. And how dare Senator Gillibrand, the phony senator from New York? She is never going to be the legitimate senator of the great state of New York. It's always going to be Alphonse D'Amato.
While I agree with your outrage about that, Dwight, the fact of the matter is the bigger outrage of all of this are putschists who are rolling around the Capitol trying to destroy the place. That's the bigger outrage.
There's certainly, there's certainly hypocrites on all sides, but at the end of the day, the real outrage here is the fact that, a few bad apples, right, came in and violently disrupted the event. At the end of the day, I want to commend Vice President Pence for doing the right thing here and standing up for his role in the constitutional process. Mike Lee said it best, our great senator from the state of Utah. He said, the role here is largely ceremonial. It's to open and shut. They open the votes, they count them, shut the envelope and move on to the next vote. And that's exactly what Congress ended up doing. Some members wanted to make procedural objections. That as much I may disagree with that, but that's their right, and that's within the confines of the process. That's totally different from violently entering and disrupting the proceedings from occurring. That is categorically unacceptable. And the fact that there was people that were hesitant to condemn that, anyone that's hesitant to condemn the violent disruption of congressional proceedings, especially proceedings as historically important as the counting of electoral votes, that's unacceptable. That needs to be condemned.
This is what I was getting, and I guess I agreed with Brian up until he said coup d'etat, because some boomers running inside a building to try to stop a count and speak to the manager, that's not exactly a coup d'etat, and I think we should condemn what happened. And there were some very legitimately bad actors who were trying to cause a civil disturbance. There was this AF group that Nick Fuentes has something to do with, and there were and Matthew Heimbach, who created a lot of trouble at Towson a decade ago, was one of the people who stormed in there. I saw a post.
And, I'll say this also, not only that, it's, some could even call it an unauthorized tour of the United States Capitol, and they were picking up a few souvenirs. That's what.
Wait. I mean, Dwight, come on. We got to call a spade a spade. When you're walking out with the podium with the seal,
I was going. That's a
little bit more like breaking and entering. Come on.
I was going somewhere with my analogy, saying an unauthorized tour. As in, it's kind of like, isn't that what CNN says when looters were taking flat screen TVs? There are no flat screen TVs in the Capitol, so they took the podiums. I mean, they can't, looters can't be choosy.
I hate to laugh at this, but did anyone see the person who stole the podium listed on eBay?
Yeah,
I saw that.
I couldn't tell if that was a real thing or if somebody faked that, but
I didn't look at the auction, but it did seem real.
I tell you
Yeah, and
These were not. I agree. These were not the brightest bulbs in the drawer that were executing this putsch.
yeah. Then again,
But, I want to go back to something Ryan said, because I think, Vice President Mike Pence is missing a letter in front of his name, and that is M, because he was the MVP in my book of this week. I think he did an amazing job. He, he fulfilled his constitutional duty. He spent the past 4 years loyally serving the president. Not one complaint from the president. He was always a very loyal foot soldier. Like many would argue, a vice president should be, regardless of who's president. Your vice president should be loyal to a T. But when it came to fulfilling his constitutional duty, he said, "Look, I'm going to uphold the oath I took," and I think he did an amazing job. And I think I read a quote from Newt Gingrich today, also commending the vice president's actions, and I think he really just I think the world got to see Mike Pence at his best, standing up for our country, standing up for the rule of law.
Pence 2024, Nate.
I
We bill
agree.
ourselves as the party of law and order. I think it's important that we actually practice what we preach, and I think Mike Pence did just that. And another person who I think also stood up and did what's right was Attorney General Barr, and I still have great respect and admiration for the now former Attorney General. Just two men who I think really just are wonderful public servants and did a great job for we the people, regardless of how crazy things got.
And I'd like to add another name really quickly. I think Senator Tom Cotton definitely deserves some plaudits, because there were some doubts about where he'd be on this whole thing, and he sort of, in the final hour, he endorsed counting the votes and called for order. So I think Senator Cotton's another figure who deserves some applause for that.
And here's the thing, Leo, our senators, we take an oath to the Constitution, not to the president. We are Americans first, Republicans second, and Democrats maybe 35 on the list of priorities. But here's the thing, it's a sad day. I mean, we're starting to look like, I tell you, this looks like a third world banana republic. That's what that behavior. It's like, all week, it's like they were acting like children who couldn't get their way, so they decided to throw the blocks down, kick the blocks over, and ruin the little city that
they looked built. Like many of the countries we have sent peacekeeping forces to.
Yes, I mean, it's like, come on, these people are no different than what example can I say without getting into trouble?
Just let it go, man.
Yeah. But my point is this. I tell you, our senators did a great job, and I tell you, and I might get some flack for saying this, but I'll tell you this: the president is the reason I think we lost the 2 Senate seats in Georgia. Nobody wants to say that. Nobody will really.
Dude, I've been saying that for weeks, man.
Yes,
there are plenty of people been saying
nobody
that.
except for Brian is willing to say that.
Yeah, I think there are plenty of people have been saying that.
But here's the thing. I think, I'm still optimistic about 2022. I know a lot of these people say, we're going to go and break lanes. Good luck with that. Ask Ross Perot and Pat Buchanan how Pat Buchanan's Patriot Party, that vibrant party called the Patriot Party, they're giving us a run for our money in every state, Brian, every couple of years, Yeah, that's how successful.
I will say this, though. I don't know about the Senate. I certainly think that Republicans will win back the House in 2022.
I think we'll win back the Senate,
a combination of the Biden-Harris team probably falling on its face, but also how heavily redistricting favors Republican states right now.
And also the civil war that's going to break out amongst the woke Democrats and the not as woke
hold on,
Democrats.
We got a civil war breaking out our own party, too. Let's not worry about their civil war until we're done with ours.
See, Brian, I don't think we're headed to civil war in our party. Okay, let me tell you, at the end of the day, we're Republicans. We are still the party of Ronald Reagan, Barry Goldwater, Richard Nixon. It is not the party of Donald Trump.
I agree with that, but then you also notice that half the Congressional House caucus voted to reject Arizona and Pennsylvania's returns.
Right. I mean,
almost on Pennsylvania.
Right. I mean, that's the thing. How does the Republican Party reconcile the fact that you have all these congressmen and you had a handful of senators that wanted to overturn this and that voted against this thing? I mean, that is a problem for the Republicans, right?
Yeah, it's above my pay grade right now, but I'll tell you that it's an interesting dynamic, because now you almost have the Republican Party of the Senate and the Republican Party of the House now. I mean, we're talking about the two different chambers are now going in 2 different directions. And that's an interesting dynamic in and of itself, as trying to hold off any of what's going on with the with what the Biden-Harris administration is going to be doing. The next
Brian, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, if you look back to why was the Senate created in the founding of this country, it was to, hold off on the, temporary impulses of the time. There's a reason that senators serve 6-year terms. If it was up to me, senators wouldn't be popularly elected. But,
Yeah.
That's kind of besides the point. But the Senate, more statesman-like, more, doing what's right. And even the House, if they want to grandstand, this is an area where I disagree with you. I think anyone calling on members of Congress to resign for making objections, I think that's a little ridiculous. I mean, come on. You're allowed to make an objection, okay? This violence, everyone's condemning violence, or at least everyone within the realm of reason is condemning violence. But, if people want to object, if they want to do the thing, I mean, Congress, especially the House, is really all about grandstanding. That's kind of what they do most of the time, instead of actually, passing legislation that would help the American people. So they want, as far as they were concerned, it was another opportunity to grandstand the same way the Democrats grandstanded in 2017, led by Montgomery County's very own Jamie Raskin, as our friend Mark Umpheffer pointed out in the document today in his piece. Is the Democrats were all objecting in 2017 to Trump. They objected in 2004 to George W. Or in 2005 to George W. Bush. They objected in 2001.
The thing I will say about this though, is the fact that the difference that I see between the two, and there are differences, is when those are races, it was a couple of representatives with no senators. There was no real organized and serious effort. And even if you look back in 2004, when they tried to challenge George W. Bush's reelection, John Kerry himself objected to the objection to his own defeat. So, I mean, there is a great difference here. Plus, of course, in those 3 elections, we didn't quite have the 2 months full of legal hoopla.
2000, we did have that in 2000.
Yeah, 2000, I'll grant you. 2000 was its own animal.
In 2000, I tell you, the father of the internet, Al Gore, he was so smug, he was so arrogant, and you had all these Democrats, going from Cynthia McKinney. I don't know if many of you guys remember Cynthia McKinney.
Was it the Green Party nominee for president one year?
Yes. She ran for president or something. No, that was Carol Mosley Braun.
No, it was 2008.
To kind of finish my point, and then I'll cede my time. The point I was trying to make is, objections, grandstanding, there's precedent for that. Democrats have done it. Republicans have done it. And at the end of the day, it's not grounds for resignation. It's just, it's kind of just par of the course for the House of Representatives.
I want to move on a little bit off this topic, but it's still tangentially related. It's kind of the fallout from this. I mean, President Trump's about to go off to Mar-a-Lago in a couple of weeks, but the fallout's still going to be here for a lot of Republican leaders. I know in the club that I'm a member of, as well as my county Republican Party and the state Republican Party, has gotten a lot of flack from people for, denouncing violence. And I'm thinking, when did we stop being the party of law and order? When did we stop being the party of law? Because what we are saying is the exact same thing we said. We're not hypocrites. We're saying the exact same thing we said when we saw Ferguson burning, when we saw Seattle burn, when we saw DC burn this past summer, and then you have these numbskull state U.S. senators like Christine Gillibrand, who basically says, well, if those were black people, they would have shot them on the spot. I'm thinking, yeah, thank you, Senator Gillibrand. You're coming around to President Nixon's policy on restoring order, and it's funny. It took him 50 years to come around to seeing President Nixon's way of dealing with crowd control.
I think the problem that we're seeing, though, is the fact that we are seeing party organs like the Washington County Republican Central Committee, the Harford County Young Republicans are cheering this stuff on. Not just the fact that there was a protest, but actually cheering on the riots and doing it on social media. And that's a problem that's a problem for everybody, quite frankly. I mean, the Republican Party apparatus, I said the Maryland Republican Party, and certainly Montgomery County and the state YRs and others, none of them have condoned what has happened, but there are fringe party elements out there that are in favor of this stuff. That's a problem.
Newt Gingrich put out a great statement. I shared that, and everybody piles on. Newt was the guy that you were worshiping 3 days ago. all of a sudden Newt is this rhino sellout establishment swamp creature. They did this. I mean, these people have no freaking loyalties to the people that have been loyal to the president. Newt Gingrich has been more than loyal to the president, as has many members of Congress who now are being sworn for their being for law and order. It goes back. President Nixon was a law and order president. President Reagan was a law and order governor when he restored order to Berkeley when he was governor. We have a lot of law and order Republican governors, and all of our presidents have always been law and order. That's why we don't deal with this kind of nonsense. You have patsies like Jimmy Carter, who basically let people run amok in D.C., I believe, or Bill Clinton when you had the rioting in Mount Pleasant.
Dwight, what bothers me, about all this, is just that because we saw it. I think Ryan saw it too. As we saw the communiques, the emails, from the Central Committee members, when we were trying to issue a statement, condemning this, is that we have a lot of other people saying, not so fast. We think it's Antifa that infiltrated and doing all this stuff. I'm like, wait a minute. It's like, where are you guys coming from?
What world are you living in?
They're actually saying, hold off and don't readily condemn what happened there, the violence there, because of other things. What's going on?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and jump in here just because I've been on the receiving end of a lot of this. I helped draft the statement that the Montgomery County Central Committee put out, and a lot of people feel very passionately about condemning violence, which I didn't think would be that controversial. But at the end of the day, people are very upset, and I understand why they are upset, right? A lot of people, they have been led to believe that there's been widespread election fraud and that nothing's being done about it, and they see us as selling out. I would like to know if I've sold out, where's my paycheck, but that's besides the point. Everyone's emotions are very high right now. Tension very high right now. I've been trying to just ignore it. I'm not responding to the negative emails. I'm not responding to the emails calling me a sellout or a rhino or, country club Republican. Just let the passion boil over. At the end of the day, most of these people will come back. They'll be our friends. They'll be good Republican Party members moving forward. We just give them till January 20th. I think once Biden's inaugurated, reality will kind of set in for people. But right now, sometimes when it's like when a child is very upset, you just need to let them kind of be upset for a little bit, and
or you give them a spanking,
don't poke them at their height of anger. Okay, just
But Ryan,
I'm confused. You're from Montgomery County. I thought all of you were country club Republicans.
We are, but some people don't.
Apparently not.
Clubs.
Hey, mute that guy.
But here's the thing.
I think as yesterday showed that for some of the country club Republicans of 10 or 20 years ago, I think they've all figured out that the Democrats have a better woke image laundering service, so they've all kind of ran away. There aren't many left.
But I'll tell you this, with Ryan, without mentioning names, I would say one of the most ardent critics of your email should resign, frankly. They should resign from the committee if they feel that strongly. Get the hell out of my
I don't want to get into that. I'm not gonna. People are very upset.
I am saying that. Something. I'm sorry. I was very upset when George W. Bush had to leave and go into retirement. I wanted him to have 3-4 more years after that because him and Dick Cheney would have been awesome for 4 more years. Dick Cheney, 2024. There was something on the Council on Foreign Relations website how Dick Cheney is the only man that can save America now. He's got the heart of a 35-year-old.
That's gonna spew all sorts of new conspiracy theories.
But on all the things that we've been talking about so far, Ryan talked about the Senate and the House and the behavior. It's we all kind of, I think, know that the House doesn't really get a whole lot done, and the Senate has always been known as this kind of august and revered body and everything like this. But for those people, for those House members, and particularly for the Senate members, the ones that objected to, and we had a few that decided that after all they weren't going to object, especially after the violence. What's their future in the party? Are the people today, the Republicans today, are they going to remember what they did, in 2022 and 2024, the ones that don't agree with these guys, and hold it against them for a potential re-election or potential presidential runs? Or is this something that, are these guys trying to play into something for 2022 and 2024, hoping that they can draw the Trump base, into their next reelection campaign? I mean,
Well, we know that that's what several of them are doing or were trying to do. I mean, that's what, every move that Cruz and Howley and Cotton in particular made was with designs on 2024. I don't think that those that did the right thing and chose not to vote for decertification, I think that those people will be fine. I mean, I think ultimately, as there's always a rump element within the Republican Party that holds every grievance, real or imagined, for the rest of their lives against certain politicians. But I think that history and the electorate will shine more favorably on those who did not vote for decertification than those the 6 or however many did.
And to your point, Brian, sorry, Dwayne, I think it's important to point out, someone who, quite frankly, had a lot of mixed news about her, but I mean, after what she did on the floor, I have to admire what she did. Senator Kelly Loeffler, after coming off the heels of a defeat, which we all felt the effects of, because that truly was a national campaign. The very next day, she's in Washington, D.C., intends to vote no, sees everything that goes down, and realizes that, I've got to do what's right for our country, and that was to not object. And so I really admire, and she gave a floor speech that got applause from all corners of the political spectrum there on the floor. And I really have to admire what she did, because, you could argue both things. Yes, she was heading out the door, but who knows what she plans to do in a couple of years. But I think she saw that as a moment to heal America, and she took that opportunity. And I think that's admirable. And so I think we should recognize senators like her who stood up for what they believe and weren't just playing political football, which is what we see every day of the year, 365 days a year. It really just thickens us all. And,
Nate, you are too young to be this cynical.
If anything, I think what we saw earlier this week really should wake us up and show us that, the American people don't want to be a political football anymore. They want real leadership. And real leadership looks like what Vice President Mike Pence did. Real leadership looks like what Senator Kelly Loeffler did. Real leadership looks like what Senator Lindsey Graham did on the floor. Lindsey Graham had another compelling floor speech, and he was one of, he was like a lieutenant for the past 4 years. And yet he gave a very compelling speech about, hey, this is about what's best for our country now. And we are a country of law and order, so we need to live up to that standard that we've set for ourselves before we try to project it on anybody else.
And one scenario, which I think is lost on a lot of folks, is what would our reaction be? Let's say the shoe was on the other foot, President Trump won, and you had the Biden violent mob come and storm the Capitol. What would we be saying today? Would we be saying, oh, give them room, they're angry, as a certain news host said, or would we have said, shoot on sight, and just dust off President Nixon's plan for Kent State and restore order to the Capitol? I mean,
I know that my reaction.
I think it's pretty obvious. I mean,
so I know my reaction would be the same.
Yeah, yours would, but I'm saying, but a lot of our friends who are basically basically acting as apologists, saying these are Antifa people or they're BLM folks,
There's already been analogies between, the Trump protests and, the BLM movement and stuff like that. We've clearly seen some different approaches, and the fact that, even Hogan came out and said that he was prevented from sending out, the National Guard to help out. The way that was treated was completely different. And I think that, if we had been on the other side, there would not have been this, nominal force in front of the Capitol building. I mean, Trump basically announced, he broadcasted all of his intentions, what he was going to do. He basically called the rally, then he provoked the rally, then he had, Giuliani, basically do a call to arms. I mean, you can't get more clear as far as what they're, broadcasting. And yet we still had such a nominal response to that the police there were overrun, and no reinforcements ever really came in time. That would have been completely different. If it
the picture from one of the BLM marches where you had the DC Guard with their weapons at the ready on the steps of the Capitol versus when the BLM guys weren't even that particularly close to the Capitol, versus the completely almost open door policy, it looked like, and I use that facetiously. You know, I mean,
it is the people's house after all.
yeah, people keep telling me that. You know, it's
So
like,
why aren't we getting any rent from these people if it's our house, Brian?
we're getting interest, lots of interest. But I mean, the problem is that if responsible planning was done, then there would have been, you know, guns on the ready on the Capitol steps to prevent this from getting as far as it did. I mean, 4 people died in this. I think we can't forget that, including a protester probably wearing some back the blue shirt, you know, busting in the head of a Capitol police officer with a fire extinguisher, and he died yesterday. I mean, this is real world stuff we're talking about here. This isn't fantasy land anymore. I mean, real people died in this melee, and you know, the lack of preparation. And I don't know who's to blame. I don't know if it's the administration. I don't know if it's the DC police. I don't know if it's Capitol Police. But whoever, I mean, it's damn near criminal, the lack of preparation and security preparation that went into this.
Well, I'll tell you.
You know, to follow up to what Brian said, I think that, you know, assigning blame at this point is not really productive, right? We need to look forward. This is a time of, you know, great national stress, great national tension, and trying to say, oh, it's this person's fault or, oh, it's that person's fault really isn't going to accomplish anything. At the end of the day, whether you like President Trump or not, he's going to be out of office in 12 days. Calls to impeach him, remove him via the 25th Amendment, that would cause, you know, much more harm than good. There's no use in dividing the country over some sort of virtue signaling measure with 12 days left. But we need to come together and we need to heal, and we need to not use this as a political weapon against our opponents. Okay, this was a terrible event in our nation's history, a stain on our nation's history. And it's, you know, to kind of go back to what Nate said about Senator Lindsey Graham's speech, his was probably the favorite speech I heard the whole time. You know, Lindsey Graham has been a lieutenant to Trump all along. He's helped Trump push a lot of his key accomplishments through. And we can stand behind what President Trump has accomplished as president. I know I just stand behind a lot of what President Trump's accomplished as president, and still acknowledge that it's a shame that it's ending like this. And it's no use in assigning blame, but it's a shame that it ended like this.
He could have had a great legacy, I think. He found the cure for COVID-19, Operation Warp Speed. You know, if Hillary Clinton were president, we'd still be waiting for a vaccine currently right now. If Hillary Clinton got elected, we'd be paying twice in taxes at the very least, probably more. We'd have basically a lot of craziness happening as a result of Hillary being president. If the president gave us a tax cut, the cure for COVID-19, which is I think the biggest thing. He basically restored American hegemony around the world. As I once said, it's better to be feared.
Boy, you and I are going to greatly disagree on that.
You know, so the French didn't like us anymore. You know,
I think that a big factor with President Trump's behavior since the end of the election cycle, and it was certain media sources had called that he'd lost the election, is that he got on board this stop the steal bandwagon that I think probably third-party people started to kind of egg him on, who suspected that it was the case that there was some election fraud. And I have nothing to say about election fraud, if there was any, and I'm sure there's a tiny amount. Certainly wasn't enough to influence the outcome of the election in any significant states.
I mean,
could I finish up here? I just have a little bit more to this point, but I think I basically agree with you, Dwight. I think he was in a great position to be a party leader and a kingmaker within the Republican Party, if not the 2024 candidate. Yet he failed to concede. He wasted his time on the stop the steal pious fiction that was made by people who were really just reply guys responding to his Twitter to rack up followers. I think that made him a little more unhealthy mentally than he was in the first place. And I think he used time doing that he could have done pushing a solid stimulus, or pushing forward the vaccine, or solving some of these civil society issues that are now all Biden's to
screw up.
He could have left a lot of voters with voters' remorse for having voted for Biden with that time, but instead he acted like the mainstream media said that he would if he lost.
And to me, at the end of the day, I don't know why he behaved. He's still a multi-billionaire. He still gets to go down to the formerly CW Post mansion, Mar-a-Lago, Florida, golf. He's making money. He's doing well financially. It's not like
But his promise, he's going to spend the next 4 years of his life giving depositions.
Yeah.
Well, it's really about the Trump brand. I mean, if you think about Trump before and after the presidency, he was always about promoting his own brand, and it's been the same way during his presidency. I mean, if you think about his foreign policy, it's really all about him. He didn't really have, other people that really pushed his policy. It was all his stuff. And for him to exit gracefully, I don't think would have been consistent with the image that he'd kind of been working to build up. So I think, I don't think anyone was surprised. It's just unfortunate.
Yeah, I tell you, I was talking. Actually, Jeff, you and I were having this conversation. I think Wednesday we were having lunch actually about this. The folks that were storming the Capitol. I don't know, Brian, are you old enough from the movie V, The Final Battle? Do you remember that movie at all? V.
The TV movie?
Yes.
I watched the reboot when it came on ABC, so I'm a little too young for that.
Okay, never mind then. But there's a scene in there where the aliens are finally kicked off the planet, right? And they storm the Capitol building. Guy pulls out a Uzi, shoots down the alien flag. And I'm like, that's what these guys envision is going to happen. They're going to come in there, raise up the Trump flag, and shoot down the stars and stripes.
Leave it to Dwight for dated cultural references.
Yeah.
It was. I tell you,
there has to be at least one per show. Okay.
I tell you.
Yeah, I think Don had something.
No, I was going to say, Dwight. I mean, you were talking about the legacy thing, and what that reminds me of is just that GW law professor Jonathan Turley, not long after the election, had said that this was an opportunity for President Trump to basically kind of hit a high watermark in essence, right? Give a speech, kind of go through there and really make this a moment for him. He is now saying, after all of this, from Wednesday, he says President Trump's legacy is in tatters, and I think that's what we're seeing here. Is that where is that legacy now? He had an opportunity. He had promised. Did he not promise that that if the Electoral College certified, basically said that the vote was going to Biden on December 14th, he would concede. We didn't hear that. I mean, it took this act, all this craziness, for him to finally do it. And I think he still did it quite reluctantly.
Yeah, he should have been on television Wednesday, not yesterday. He should have been on the speech he gave yesterday. He should have done that on Wednesday, I think.
Well,
those remarks he gave on Wednesday, talking about "we love you," was god awful. I mean, that's one of the worst speeches. That's one of the worst, most un-American speeches I've ever seen.
The same problem. The problem he had is the same problem that a lot of his supporters had, trying to justify it and explain it. And it shouldn't have any qualification. There shouldn't be anything controversial. It's not anti-Trump to condemn violence, or it shouldn't be. It should be, it should be go home. This has gotten out of hand. Period. End of statement. Everyone needs to go home. It shouldn't be, a lot of people online are doing this. Oh, well, what if it's Antifa? We should wait to put something out. Or what if it's doesn't matter. It could be Joe Smith from another country. Who cares? The people causing violence at the Capitol need to go home. That should not have been a controversial statement. That should not have been something that there was reluctance to put out. He should have gotten on TV immediately. And the minute people started to, breach the security at the Capitol and said, this is getting out of hand, everyone needs to go home now. And that's all he had to say. No qualifying it. No, we love you. None of that.
Everything that you say that you need to know about Trump is the reports that came out from his own staffers in the West Wing. One saying that he was almost giddy that it was happening, and he was excited and was confused why other people in his orbit were not excited. While at the same time, by the way, the White House counsel was telling people to avoid Trump so that they didn't, like the staffers didn't also get charged potentially with sedition. But then he was mad that Joe Biden went on TV first. It's like, nobody stopped you from going on television to not tell people to knock this off. You are the president of the United States. And in time of national crisis, you should be on television addressing the people or fixing it or both.
He should have been on 10 minutes after it started. 10 minutes after he
It
started.
should have taken that long.
Well, the reason I'm giving it 10
This
minutes
is
is you got to get your thoughts together and stuff like that. So 10 minutes,
I
Here's
don't
the
think Trump puts a lot of thought into his speeches for
President
better. or
Bush was on television right after 9/11. He
Yeah.
addressed the country, and let me tell you, and the president's going to be delivering his farewell address soon. Now, here's the question: who will have a better farewell address, Richard Nixon's resignation speech or President Trump's farewell address?
Define better.
Better. I mean, you know what's better and what's worse.
I mean, the question is whether or not Trump is going to give an actual farewell address, or if it's just going to be another airing of the grievances. I think it's tending to be the latter.
I mean, speculation here isn't going to get us anything. It's only going to further divide us, if anything. I think rather than focusing on what may happen or may not happen, I think we need to focus on where we need our party to go from here.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, let's try to. I mean, we've been beating this dead horse for 40 minutes.
Yeah.
Let's try to become productive now. Let's move the conversation forward.
Who will
Let's
be
talk
the
about the party that we want to see.
Yeah. And Nate, the question is, who will be the William F. Buckley of this era? William F. Buckley, who stood up to the John Birch Society and said, "Go pound sand, you freaking racists." Who's going to stand? Who's going to be the guy that's going to tell these MAGA folks, "It's over, give up"? Who's going to be the one bold enough to say that?
I don't like the way you frame that, Dwight. I mean, I get what you're getting at there, but it's we have to realize many of our friends, many people on this call would be considered those MAGA folks, to different regards. Some of us are Hogan folks, others are MAGA folks, but regardless,
and I've got my Trump card right here,
and I've got my Hogan bracelet on here.
Yeah.
I think the difference is we need to rather than looking at assigning, we need to not demonize those within our own ranks, and we need to recognize that they have, there is legitimate hurt, there is legitimate frustration because we have friends that went to Washington, D.C. to exercise their First Amendment right, who were then swept up in this insurrection that they wanted no part in, and yet they've been blamed for. So I think we need to realize that, there's a lot of hurt there, and there's a lot of blame that's being passed around. Some of it rightfully so. Other people, once again, getting swept up into something they wanted nothing to do with.
Yes.
But I think rather than, relitigating that, I think we need to leave that to the courts because everyone who committed a criminal act should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. But let's leave that to the FBI. Let's leave that to law enforcement. Let's leave that to the Capitol Police. And let's talk about where we want our party to go. Let's talk about the party that we want to lead as we enter into 2021 and go into 2022. We need to turn this into a constructive conversation where we're not beating down our own, but where we're coming together, reclaiming our party. And I'm not saying, some might call me a little bit too establishment. I'm not saying, embracing
Are you old enough to
establishment
be an establishment
again,
person?
but I am saying moving forward and, coming back to our roots of what we truly stand for as a party. And I think that might stand in stark contrast into some when compared to some of the things we've seen over the past few years. And I'll leave it at that.
But Nate, to your point,
go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, I'm firmly with you, Nate. I mean, I think that, it's going to be a difficult path forward because obviously there's a lot. I mean, you've seen that the fact that so many people voted this last time, everyone has a little bit of skin in the game, both because they are more active in the process. Plus, this has been a very difficult time because of COVID. I mean, everyone has been affected in some way and has their own issues. I think from a party standpoint, I mean, we need to really look at the needs of the people that are affected. And you think about, when I think about the Republican Party, I think about, the party of the small businesses, the party that really are trying to deal with the rural farmers and the people that are, trying to make things, on their own. How can we serve them? How can we make sure their interests are best served? Being able to provide for them, understanding what their needs are, how they are hurting, and making sure that businesses don't fail just because of, nobody's really looking after them. So I think, working with the Democrats, trying to get bipartisan support for economic stimulus bills. I mean, we already have, a lot we're going to have to repay, finding ways to stimulate the economy to get businesses, operational, to ensure that our, farming infrastructure is not too grossly affected. There's a lot of things I think that the Republicans base, have needs for that we just need to really focus on, be advocates for them and really push on that.
And Jeff, I think going back, I think the Republican Party our message is still the right message. National security, tax cuts, family values. That is the tried and true formula where we win elections. President Nixon won his election in '68 on this same tenets of tax cuts, family values, and national security. President Reagan, President Bush 43. Republicans do well when we talk about the real issues that affect everyday Americans. Tax cuts, taxes are too high. I don't think anybody on this call or anybody watching will disagree that will say taxes are not high enough, unless you got some.
So, White, to add on to what you're saying, I think that, we have an advantage over the next 4 years in the sense that it's a lot easier to be in the opposition than it is to be in charge. When you're in charge, you have diverging visions for what you want to do. But when you're in the minority, you can have an abstract vision for what you want to do differently than what's currently being done. And that applies both, nationally on the national stage, where Democrats are going to have unified government for the next 2 years. And also here in Maryland, we have a Republican governor, and we're grateful to have a Republican governor, but the legislature has Democrat supermajorities in both chambers. And we can draw a clear contrast on issues that the people of Maryland agree with the Republican message on: pocketbook issues, education, the Kirwan Commission, using education as a lever to push through tax increases and big government spending. Most Marylanders don't agree with that, and Governor Hogan's veto needs to stand in the next session. Public safety. We need to defend the police in Maryland. Maryland is mostly a suburban state. Most of the people who will vote for Republicans in Maryland live in the suburbs, and they do not want to defund the police. They do not want crime in their neighborhoods. They want safe communities. And, there's other issues. The Republican Party, especially, our members on the shore, standing up for the Chesapeake Bay. Just because we're not for big government regulation doesn't mean we can't be, supporting, a clean bay or, low pollution in mountain Maryland or that sort of thing. There are issues that Marylanders agree with us on that we can talk about, and we can message, and we can rally people behind. That's how we move forward from this. We focus on issues, not on personalities. I really liked, the Capitol Gazette did an interview after, the horrific events of Wednesday with a few Republican leaders from across the state, members of our General Assembly. But our state party chairman really said it best. He goes, "This is not the party of Trump. This is not the party of Hogan. This is the party of, limited government and freedom," right? It's a party of ideas. It's not about a cult of personality in any one direction. It's about, pushing ideas that we can rally people behind. And that's how we'll move forward from this.
What I think is, Ryan, is that, I'm totally with you as far as, making sure that the police have proper funding. When I hear defund the police, and this may just be me, but I don't hear the fact that the police have too much money. It's just that what they're being allocated doesn't necessarily reflect what the needs are, meaning that police are often called when there's domestic disputes, or there's called when there's other things that really are best handled by other, departments or agencies. So having the police have the resources to send the proper people out there to deal with the situations that are trained for that, I think is what people are really crying for, because, again, not every situation requires, a force resolution. And I think we feel like the police are kind of like the one-stop shop for any of our domestic, civil, or other issues.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we could probably have an hour-long conversation just on this, but I think my main problem with the defund the police movement is that they're terrible at branding, right? It's this big umbrella of a lot of things. There are people on the more moderate side of it that say, we should really just reallocate how, funding is distributed within the police and, use less force. And that's something that, could be pretty bipartisan. A lot of people could get behind. Then there's other, the far end of it that's trying to use it to, pull back police funding entirely, not have police get involved in or law enforcement get involved in certain situations. You saw this a lot, people were upset about the police response to the protest this summer, and they were saying, "Oh, we've got to defund the police. We can't be responding to this." Or they were upset about, certain incidents, that happened over the summer. And when you have such a broad brush movement, it's easy to get gaslit into saying, "Oh, I'm not for defunding the police." Well, defunding the police just means that we want to reallocate resources. So I think, really, that movement, a lot of it is coming from people on the left. And if they want to push through actual meaningful reforms, my advice to them would be to really break it up and, define what they actually want to do, and not just, use these broad brushes that get people stuck in these labels.
problem the left has with their branding, like about things about defund the police, the fact that so much of their branding and so much of their policy direction almost kind of comes from Twitter and kind of comes from corners of the internet. And that's, when you're talking about such a small percentage of the American people who are even using those systems on an active basis. And it's kind of the same trap that Republicans, particularly the president, fell into over the last couple of years. I mean, everybody wants to talk about Section 230. Nobody outside of the internet, political community has any clue what Section 230 is, nor do they care, quite frankly. So, I mean, that's one of the problems that we just have with our political dialogue these days, is so much of what's going on in Washington is being driven by this fraction of a fraction of a fraction of the most radical activists on both sides of the aisle. And those voices get amplified, and you have members of Congress who feel like they have to conform or address the issues in the way that those radical folks think they should be addressed. So, I mean, it's kind of a bigger cultural problem where we have so few people. Politics has become such a large part of everybody's life, but so few people are actively involved beyond the top line. And when those top line conversations, when the slogan instead of the details are what's driving policy and driving the conversation, that's bad juju on both sides of the aisle.
Well, I actually wrote a piece that's in the Daily Caller this summer talking about why police abolition is a luxury belief. And I think that kind of plays into what you're saying. Some, Brian, very online people who spend a lot of time on Twitter, they're more likely to be college educated, they're more likely to be young and professional. These are people living in guarded apartments. These aren't business owners. They're not people who own a single family house. They don't really have much of a need for police because they're in privately secured areas. Sometimes newer communities like Hunt Valley that are built by developers, or the Hunt Valley Town Center, for example, that was built by developers, they could hire security. They're the people who would least be impacted by police defunding or abolition. And I think you kind of see this area where you have this woke elite that doesn't really understand what minorities or poor people want or really need, because that's not who I was hearing defund the police from. And there was polling. It was like, if you had a post-grad degree and you were young and you were college educated and you were very liberal, you're likely to support it. But every other group, the support didn't break 50%.
Very
All right,
true.
so we're getting close to the end here, but
Talk, you want to do extra innings.
just general things about what the party should be doing and things like that. Ryan talked about this kind of, we don't this cult of personality type of things like this. Is that with Donald Trump basically out of the picture on a national basis, no longer being the president, is that going to be a positive for the party? I mean, for senators and for others, when they run for re-election, because I think we saw, really in large measure that the race, in Georgia, the Senate races in Georgia, it wasn't about Georgia issues. It was still about Donald Trump.
I'll say this: if even if nothing else happens other than I never see another boat parade or car parade again, and people in those actually go out and try to do something that wins an election, then there's nowhere to go but up. I mean, just that, getting rid of that aspect of politics will improve Republican chances drastically.
Well, here,
Brian, I don't think the people that are doing boat parades are particularly interested in knocking doors. I think the more likely thing is, it's a lot of that crowd wasn't engaged in politics before. And, some of them, unfortunately, might go away and they might not vote again, right? A lot of them didn't vote before President Trump. I think one of the things I've been trying to remind people of over the past few days, people are worried, we don't want to, alienate people that came into the party because of Trump. There's hundreds of people that did boat parades, did car parades, are going out and saying they're going to start the Patriot Party and all this stuff. But then there's tens of thousands of Marylanders and millions of people across the country who voted for President Trump, supported him, but weren't this sort of loud, outspoken voice on the internet. And it's important to realize that even if you have the loud voices on Facebook and Twitter and Parler saying that they're going to leave the Republican Party and they want nothing to do with us and they're going to form the Patriot Party or they're going to become independents. That doesn't represent the average rank and file person who, was part of a larger demographic shift into the Republican Party.
Here's something else, Ryan. You mentioned they want to start the Patriot Party or Reform Party, whatever you want. Let me just remind you, the last nominees of the Reform Party were Patrick J. Buchanan and Lillian Falani. Lillian Falani, she was a communist.
I have to correct you, Dwight, only because that the Reform Party still technically exists. And they nominated, I'd have to look it up, but I mean, they kept nominating some wackadoodle people that made
Pat Schultz one of their nominees recently.
they started making, they started nominating some people that made Pat Buchanan look. Oh, Rocky De La Fuente has been the the past 2 years, which has everything you need to know.
Maybe
but the last time
next time.
Rocky De La Fuente has lost more elections than any human being.
Did Gary Johnson, was he Reform or was he Patriot?
He was Libertarian.
Oh, Libertarian.
All right,
At least he was a respectable third party, damn it.
Okay, Dwight, we're at the 5-minute mark or 4-minute mark.
Yeah, final thoughts, everyone. Let's start with who wants to go first. Let's go with Leo. Final thoughts, Leo.
Final thoughts. If you don't know, the president was thrown off of Twitter and I believe Facebook today, and a lot of conservative accounts that are kind of adjacent or not even really. I've heard rampant reports of outages, blocks. So I think tech regulation is the big lesson that comes from this. After, let's nominate a guy who's not off his rocker in the future. So let's see about making these things a public utility or changing Section 230, and let's nominate someone who's a little bit more healthy mentally in 2020.
By the way, Leo, speaking of that, when I usually do the watch parties, I usually am able to invite people to the watch party. Today, I cannot invite anyone to our watch party.
I appreciate how last week you invited me to the watch party for the show I was appearing on. That was nice.
Dwight, can I go next? Because I was going to give a similar kind of thought. So
yes, right.
I agree with Leo. I think that, it's not good for the country, for, the president to be thrown off of these platforms. I think that, social media is the public square. I disagree with, looking at Section 230 and tech regulation. I don't really think that's the answer. I also don't think going to, Parler and MeWe is the answer, because, sitting in your own echo chamber does nothing but, causing you to howl into the wind. But there are areas where, we can use services for online communication that are better. An example is Signal. It's been a service that's out for years. It's encrypted communication. It's private. There's no censorship. It's a nonprofit business model. And that, for critical, in the 21st century, I think online chat is critical infrastructure for the country, and doing it nonprofit through the private sector as opposed to, making it a public utility is a very good thing. A lot of our Montgomery County Republican Club group chats just moved over to Signal. And that reminds me, Don, we have to send you the invite because you haven't moved over yet, but everyone else has. And, they've seen an explosion in users this week after the controversy surrounding the president getting thrown off of Facebook and people getting upset with WhatsApp. And then also, Elon Musk tweeted to download Signal, and that didn't help matters, or it did help matters in terms of getting more users. But, you can not rely on these companies, and you can kind of, show them, oh, wait, a lot less people are using Facebook Messenger, a lot less people are using WhatsApp. But I don't think regulation is the answer to that problem. But I do agree it's a serious issue we need to look at moving forward.
Nate, would you like to be next?
Sure. I would just say it's hindsight is always 20/20. I think we need to hold ourselves accountable as we hold our friends accountable. If you were saying one thing on Tuesday, you shouldn't be saying the exact opposite today. I think consistency is important. I like to think I've been consistent with many of my positions as long as I've been in politics. And, at the end of the day, this is our day, America. This is our day, Maryland. And we just need to take our party back on the right track. We need to continue to keep our state on the right track. I look at this and my focus has always been on 2022. So let's stop throwing political footballs. Let's get out there. Let's keep changing Maryland. Let's find another Republican nominee for governor who's going to keep changing Maryland. And let's continue to build this state, make it somewhere where we're proud to live. and let's just keep doing the great things we've been doing for the past, 6+ years under the leadership of Governor Hogan. Let's keep that going, and let's keep our focus where it should always be, which is as Central Committee members. We should be focused on our counties. We should be focused on our state. And so let's keep doing that. It's our day.
Jeff, final thoughts.
So yeah, I was just trying to gather my thoughts because I do agree with what a lot of people are saying here. The first thing I was thinking is that I was thinking back to our predictions of what we were thinking about for the election and for the Senate. And I think, unfortunately, all my predictions did come true. Not that that's necessarily a good or bad thing. It's just how things played out. That being said, I think the critical thing that was mentioned is how we move forward. And I've said it before and I'll say it again. I think that the Republican Party has something to offer every single American, whether they consider themselves to be Republican or Democratic, because I believe in what I consider to be the traditional Republican standards that, good governance, fiscal responsibility, good stewardship, both of natural resources and of other things that we're given custodianship of. And so I think that, to get back to those core values would be my, emphasis, is that, now is the time to kind of, make amends, take responsibility for the things that, we allowed to get too far, and then say, okay, we realize that we kind of, lost our vision a little bit. Let's get back. Let's find out what the real concerns of people, deal with our core constituencies, find out what their needs are, and really just kind of focus on, representing them to Congress and to the legislative branches, and make sure that our constituents get the kind of recognition and representation that they deserve.
Brian, final thoughts.
I would like to congratulate Charleston, West Virginia, for being the new home of the FBI headquarters. I would like to congratulate the Department of the Interior for its upcoming move to Salt Lake City. And I'd like to congratulate the state of Maine on being allowed by the feds to be turned into a giant casino. The three most powerful senators right now in Washington are Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia, Senator Mitt Romney of Utah, and Senator Susan Collins of Maine. The irony is not lost on me that the bases of both parties hate both those senators, all three of those senators respectively. But those three senators now are pretty much running the show in the U.S. Senate. It does not take much for any of those three senators to disrupt something, particularly Joe Manchin, since he has indicated that he is not necessarily as woke as the rest of the Democrats in the Senate. It will be an interesting dynamic to play out here over the course of the next 2 years until the next election. And it'll be interesting to see whether or not the opinions of the bases of the two parties, if their opinions of those senators change going forward.
Don, and then.
Yeah, and then kind of, I guess, to follow up on what Brian was saying there too, because I was thinking about now that the Senate control will change hands to the Democrats, it definitely does make Manchin in particular a very key player. Will he go along with all the Democrats, throughout this thing, and in terms of some of the more radicalized parts of the Biden, the lefty part of the agenda, or will he put a stop to some of that? I'll be interested to see that. And then the other thing is that I'm glad it's technically over. We're going to have an inauguration here in 12 days. I don't know about the rest of you, but I could use a little bit of a break. And to me, Biden and Harris is going to be kind of a snooze fest at the beginning, at the least. So I think I can breathe a little bit easier and take a break while we rejigger and regenerate here.
And that's why I'm going on vacation the day after the inauguration.
Oh, you mean the Corona super spread they're going to have because they're still going to actually do the inaugural ceremonies and all that in person?
Well, they got to do some of it in person. I know it's not going to be the giant tricked out thing it was, but
anyways,
somebody has to stand there to administer the oath.
Maybe they do via Zoom and Joe could go to his basement. Anyways, but my final thoughts, I got a couple final thoughts. One, I want to say this is what I said Tuesday morning before everything happened, and I still kind of stand by it. Look, so it's a 50-50 Senate. We've been in worse situations prior to this. I mean, Don, you remember the Watergate Congress after President Nixon resigned, it's not that bad. It's not as bad in the Reagan years when we didn't have we didn't control either of the houses except for the Senate for 2 years of his first term. And then we never controlled the Senate after that. There's actually a lot of things to be positive about. We've got more Republican women in Congress than we've ever had before, more Republican minorities in Congress than ever before. We've got more Republican legislators in the country more than before. We've got more governorships. The people don't have election integrity. Voter, that is an issue for states. Elections is not a federal issue. The federal government does not dictate elections. This is all about, this is a fight we'll have in the state legislatures where we control a lot of them, where we can say, no, we are not going to do a mail-in ballot. If you're too lazy to vote on the 2 weeks we give you for early voting and then on election day, then maybe you shouldn't, then you should maybe plan better for 2 years from down the road to vote on election day. There is no reason why we should be having mail-in ballots, frankly. And I know a lot of the liberals says, well, what about people that are working? Employers have to give you time off to go vote. They can't make you stay and work. They're supposed to, it's I believe a law that the lefties put in a lot of states. And there's a lot of stuff to be positive. There's a lot of things that are coming up. I mean, even in Maryland, we won the mayoralship that was controlled by the Democrats ever since Reconstruction. Nate, this is your area of expertise. Did we ever hold the mayorship there before Reconstruction?
So, they looked back at records, and it was a little bit difficult to kind of compare apples to apples, with our parties today. But what I had heard was no, we don't believe we ever have had a Republican mayor in Cambridge until the election of Mayor Bradshaw just a few weeks ago. And he was actually just sworn in this past week. So you're right, we're making progress there. And I'd like to point out that's our neighbors in Dorchester County, but they are a shore county. So we're doing things right on the shore. And I'd invite you to come down here from your ivory towers in Montgomery. We're always welcome.
I love coming down there.
And hey, some of that economic stimulus might help too, so come on down.
Hey, Nate, I love coming to the
Ask
shore.
Dwight to knock doors in Ocean City and he'll be there.
I am the biggest advocate of conventions in Ocean City. I think there should be a bylaws change we should do. That every spring convention is Ocean City. But back to my...
In the spirit of conventions, I move to adjourn this meeting.
I've got one more final thoughts though, Ryan.
To be fair, Mr. Nyadek's motion has the floor and takes precedence over whatever you're talking about.
I don't think so. Anyways, he didn't have a second anyways. But anyways, my final thought is this, look, Happy New Year's, everyone. It's going to be whatever. We had a show last week. I know a lot of people were off and not watching our show last week, but it was a great show. Happy New Year, everyone. We've got a lot of big things for Dr. Politics. We might actually launch the website sometime this year for Dr. Politics too. Right now it's just a billboard, but we might launch that site later this year. But there's a lot of fun stuff happening. Stay tuned. We've got a lot of fun stuff, a lot of pundits, a lot of expertise. We've got a lot of new experts that we've had bringing on. So we're going to have a lot more fun, a lot of rotating doctors. I may even take off and let Dr. Nidek or Dr. Irvine get the reins of power and control the show.
Great power comes great responsibility.
Exactly.
Something Dom will have less final thoughts than Dwight.
That's until you get the captain's chair, Dr. Nidek. When you're the chief doctor, you may want to say more and pontificate some more. But with that, I want to say Happy New Year, everyone. Get ready. We are now a week closer to a shamrock shape because McDonald's conducts their war on the Irish. You get pumpkin spice at McDonald's in July, but you can't get a shamrock shake 2 days after St. Patrick's Day. That is McDonald's war on the Irish. And
there ought to be a law.
Game on McDonald's. With that thought, good night, everyone.
Good night. Thanks for having me on.